Harvard students don't work harder than you. They just think better. You sit for 8 hours. They sit for 3. You reread notes. They barely touch them. You grind. They glide. And somehow, they outperform you. That doesn't make sense. Unless everything you believe about effort is wrong. Most people think success comes from working harder. Wrong. Harvard students optimize for clarity, not effort. And once you understand how they do it, you'll never study the same way again. Chapter 1. Effort is a trap. You believe more hours equals more results. That's the biggest lie in education. A study from Stanford showed productivity collapses after 50 hours a week. Output drops, mistakes increase, learning slows. But you keep pushing. Why? Because effort feels productive. You sit there, highlighting, rereading, organizing notes. Looks good, feels good, completely useless. This is called the illusion of competence. You recognize information, so you think you understand it. You don't. Harvard students know this. They don't measure effort. They measure clarity. If they can't explain a concept in simple terms, they assume they don't understand it. So instead of reading more, they stop and ask one question. Can I explain this like I'm teaching a child? If the answer is no, they don't move forward. Most people think progress is finishing chapters. Wrong. Progress is reducing confusion. Here's what average people do. They read 20 pages and feel productive. Here's what Harvard students do. They read 2 pages and master them. Physicist Richard Feynman built his entire career on this. He said, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it. Harvard students follow that principle obsessively. They don't collect information. They compress it, like surgeons chunking data into patterns instead of memorizing facts. But here's the problem, though. Clarity takes effort, and your brain hates effort, which leads to the second advantage. Chapter 2. They remove friction. You rely on motivation. They rely on systems. Big difference. Most people think discipline means forcing yourself to work. Wrong. Discipline means removing the need to force anything. Harvard students design their environment to eliminate decision-making. No distractions, no chaos, no wasted energy. Cal Newport calls this deep work. And research shows it takes 23 minutes to refocus after distraction. You get distracted every few minutes. Do the math, you never actually focus. Harvard students know this, so they engineer clarity into their environment. Phone off, tabs closed, single task, no exceptions. They don't rely on willpower. They remove temptation. Most people think they need more discipline. Wrong. You need fewer distractions. Here's a simple tactic. The one input rule. One subject, one source, one goal. That's it. No multitasking, no switching. Because switching kills clarity. Your brain isn't designed for it. Cognitive scientists call it task switching cost. Every switch drains mental energy. Harvard students protect their attention like it's currency. Because it is. But here's the thing, though. Even with perfect focus, you can still learn slowly. That's where the third advantage comes in. Chapter 3. They think in questions, not answers. You consume information. They interrogate it. Big difference. Most people think learning is about finding answers. Wrong. Learning is about asking better questions. Harvard uses something called the Socratic method. Professors don't lecture. They question relentlessly. Why? How do you know? What's the assumption? What if it's wrong? It's uncomfortable. It's brutal. And it works because questions expose gaps. Robert Bjork, a cognitive psychologist, calls this desirable difficulty. Struggle strengthens memory. Ease weakens it. Most people avoid confusion. Harvard students chase it. If something feels easy, they get suspicious. If something feels hard, they lean in, because difficulty signals growth. Here's what average students do. Read, highlight, move on. Here's what Harvard students do. Read, question, break, rebuild. Example. Instead of reading a theory, what they ask, what problem does this solve? When does it fail? How would I explain this in real life? If they can't answer, they go back, again and again, until it clicks. That's clarity, and clarity compounds. But here's the problem, though. Even if you understand something perfectly today, you'll forget it tomorrow. That's where most people fail. Chapter 4. They optimize memory, not exposure. You think repetition creates memory. Wrong. Timing creates memory. Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered the forgetting curve. You forget most information within days, unless you review it at the right time. Not too early, not too late, just before you forget. That's how memory locks in. Harvard students don't cram. They space. They use spaced repetition. Just like medical students using Anki systems to retain massive knowledge. Here's the difference. You study 5 hours once. They study 20 minutes repeatedly. Over days, over weeks. Small sessions, perfect timing, massive retention. Most people think intensity matters. Wrong. Consistency wins. Here's a simple system. Day 1, learn. Day 2, review. Day 4, review day 7, review. That's it. Minimal time, maximum retention. But here's the thing. They don't just review. They retrieve. Active recall. Closing the book, testing themselves, forcing the brain to work. Research shows this improves retention by over 50% compared to rereading. Reading is passive. Recall is painful. Pain means progress. If your studying feels easy, you're wasting time. Quick pause. If you're still watching, good. Most people quit by now. Hit subscribe before you forget this. We fix broken learning systems here. Chapter 5. They simplify aggressively. You overcomplicate everything. More notes, more tools, more resources. Wrong. More inputs equals less clarity. Harvard students simplify ruthlessly. They follow one rule. If it's not essential, remove it. They don't use 10 resources, they use 2. They don't write pages of notes. They write one sentence, because clarity comes from reduction, not addition. This is backed by research on cognitive load. Your brain can only handle limited information at once. Overload it. You lose everything. That's why surgeons compress knowledge into patterns instead of memorizing details. That's why top learners focus on the 20% that matters. That's why less becomes more. But here's the problem though. Even if you master all of this, there's still one issue. Final loop, you can have clarity, you can have focus, you can have memory. But if you're learning the wrong things, you're still losing. Most people optimize how they learn, not what they learn. They get faster at useless skills, efficient but irrelevant. Harvard students don't just learn better. They choose better. They focus on leverage, high-impact knowledge, skills that compound. Because clarity isn't just about understanding, it's about direction. And if you get that wrong, everything else collapses. That's why I made this next video breaking down how to identify the 20% of knowledge that gives you 80% of results. Because once you combine that with everything you just learned, you won't just study better. You'll think differently, and that's where the real advantage begins. Create a new script and title.